we know that the Phoenicians and the Egyptians left colonies all over the world, because even today, a lot of the pyramids and the earthworks that they built are still here in the Americas. In fact, the largest earthworks in the entire world is to be found right here in Ohio. And all of the information from the earthworks reveal that they were built by the Phoenicians. We also have many pyramids all over Central America and in South America. And so we know that the Canaanites and the Egyptians were in the Americas thousands of years prior to Columbus. And we also know that the Phoenicians and the Israelites did a lot of things together. That's why we read that King Solomon and King Tyre went on expeditions together. Even though the Canaanites were disobedient, even though there was a lot of evil among them, that did not prevent the children of Israel from doing business with them, and in many cases going on long trips, long explorations, and they have set up colonies together too in other parts of the world. Now, what happened is, during one of ancient Egypt's downturns, the Phoenicians became the primary naval power in the Mediterranean. And this gave them access to the rest of the world, because now they can sail beyond the Straits of Gibraltar unimpeded without having to answer to anybody. And so that's exactly what the Phoenicians did. They went about the task of colonizing the world. And this is the way they did it. Let's say this is Africa. This would be Israel. Over here would be Asia. This would be the Mediterranean Sea. And up here would be Europe. What the Phoenicians did was, as they sailed along the Mediterranean Sea, they would establish colonies on both sides of the coast of the Mediterranean. And then when they went through the Straits of Gibraltar, they would set up colonies along the coast of Africa. And so what happened later on, when the Assyrians in 721 BC came and destroyed Israel and destroyed the Phoenicians, both of them remembered that they have colonies outside of this area. Both of them remember the expeditions that they made. Both of them knew of the land of milk and honey that was the Americas even at that time. And so what they did was, when the Assyrian army was bearing down on them, they started packing. In those days, there were no tanks, no airplanes, no warships, and army had to march. And so when the Assyrians left their land, they had to march by day, pitch their tent by night, and sleep. In the morning, they got up and they marched again. And so in that way, they would travel across the land to their target. Word usually get to their target quick. People find out that the Assyrians are coming. And so when the Phoenicians and the Israelites found out that the king of Assyria is waging war and is sending his armies against them, those that could left. They packed their belongings, they got on their ships, and they sailed as far away as they could. Now, many took land routes. Again, if this is Israel, you would have many of the people fleeing, taking land routes into Asia. many of the people fleeing, taking land routes into Africa, and many of the people fleeing would flee through Turkey and into Europe. Now, those are the land routes. Those that could wanted to get as far away as possible to a place that they could govern themselves, a place that offered opportunities with little resistance. And they knew of these lands. So what they did was they got on their ships with the intention of reaching the Americas. And what they did is make stops along the way. And oftentimes, when they would make stops, they would leave people behind. Over hundreds of years, these people would multiply into tens, then hundreds, then thousands, millions, and then into nations. And in that way, the Canaanites and the Phoenicians were able to colonize the entire world. Now, one thing that's very interesting to note is the way civilization actually spread. Now, ancient civilization began in this area, which is what we call North Africa or the Middle East. But Africa is a vast, vast, vast continent. In fact, probably the largest in the world. And so, the way civilization reached the interior of Africa was from its origin going this way. And in order for civilization to reach all of Africa, then it would have to make its way over the thousands of miles from North Africa, the Middle East, to the Atlantic and to South Africa. But there's a shorter way. If you do it by boat, you can go along the coast and hit those areas faster. You don't have to take land routes to reach the coast. And that's, in fact, exactly what happened, is that civilization spread along the coast. And then from the coast inward. And it took a long time for this to happen. That's why even in the 1800s, when Europe went into Central Africa, they found that evilization had not reached Central Africa, and that these people were living the way God intended for us to live. That's another story. And so what we have is the Canaanites and the Israelites fleeing for their lives and colonizing practically the entire world. If you look at ancient civilizations, such as those in Egypt, Ethiopia, and Samaria, you will find that civilization spread primarily up and down the rivers. Likewise, to the rest of the continents, civilization spread primarily in boats along the coast and eventually out into the open ocean. Once we're able to understand how civilization spread, then we can see how the Israelites were able to spread throughout the rest of the world, basically along the coast, basically leaving colonists wherever they stopped. These colonists would grow in number. In much the same way, a lot of the ancient Israelites used routes that led into the Red Sea, out of a port into the Red Sea. Out of that port, they were able to sail down the Red Sea, making stops along the way, leaving colonists along the way. Colonies in Yemen, in Saudi Arabia, and along the eastern coast of Africa. In fact, those colonies eventually reached south of Africa. The Lemba tribe in South Africa is one of those peoples that were left during the migration of the Israelites from Israel down the Red Sea along the eastern coast of Africa, around South Africa, and into South America, Brazil. King Solomon did it. Surely, when the Assyrians and the Babylonians came, those who could did it too. They tried to save their families. And so, once we understand that civilization spread along the coast, then you will have to ask yourself, are they the same people?